Hello and welcome to the first episode of the Multispecies Digest Podcast. My name is Emilija and I'm the author of Multispecies Digest, a newsletter that asks the question of what if we worked with nature, not against it. In this podcast, I read out loud the essays that I write and have written for the Multispecies Digest series. In today's episode, I will be reading out loud the essay Motivation Comes from Meaning that came out now in April of 2024. In this episode, you'll hear me read out loud the essay. I might add some commentary here and there. You might also hear some life noises happening around, so I hope you don't mind. But with that, let's begin. Motivation comes from meaning. If multispecies is not personally meaningful, you and others won't do it. It's good to be back. It's been a while. Or if you're new, welcome. Along with exciting work projects, ending my academic career, surviving Finnish winter, and finally deeply resting, I have done a lot of soul searching. Or rather, I did what needed to be done. I admitted to myself that academic research and designing with nature for sustainability had become meaningless, pointless, hollow, a burden. I was forcing it, and I was forcing myself to push through. It had been meaningless for a while, and consequently, I also lacked motivation. Why do anything if there's nothing I aspire to achieve? So how come am I back with another essay? Because letting go allowed me to find meaning again, along with motivation. How cliche. So in this week's essay, I will reflect on the meaning as the root cause of motivation and explore how we can use that when working with ourselves, with others, and in multi-species projects. Before we begin, a couple disclaimers. So first, the essays are human written and also the podcast is human produced. I do not use generative AI. All posts are planned, drafted, written, and edited by me. That means occasional typos, missing words, and yes, use of em dashes. I have used them since 2018 and they're my favorite. And it also means that in the podcast, I might say some words wrong or repeat certain parts. Then, second, all views are my own and do not reflect those of my employers or other affiliated organizations. And third, Multispecies Digest essays and podcasts are not peer-reviewed, do not constitute scientific theories or findings, and perspectives can change as new information emerges. Before we begin the essay, I also want to give the basic premise of Multispecies Digest and multispecies approaches in general, just in case. We're living in a multi-species world. Humans, our creations, our lives and businesses are deeply entangled with the natural world, with all its creatures, processes, systems, and landscapes. We're directly and indirectly connected through flows of materials, electrical energy, heat, nutrients, as well as experiences, emotions, chemical and physical reactions, and even quantum fields. Humans and nature are inseparable. No matter how hard our education, religion, economy, and personal egos might try to tell us otherwise. Humans need to relearn how to live and do business in a way that sees the interconnections, acknowledges physical and other limitations, and drastically reduces the negative impact on nature. If you want to learn more about the basics, you can check out the earlier essays of Multispecies Digest or watch an introductory lecture that I will also link in the show notes of this episode. And now, the essay itself. It was a dark winter morning. I was on a video call with an Australian friend talking about my decision to leave academic life and how happy I was about it. She was curious, what do you do instead? I'd go into industry or policy or something, I said. Nature positive and rights of nature were gaining prominence, and that's where I thought I could be useful. I wasn't sure. It wasn't until our next call a few weeks later when I had the guts to admit to myself and to her that multi-species and designing with nature, so pretty much everything I had worked on for 8+ years, was absolutely meaningless to me. I did not want to do it. I could not bear the thought that I need to do anything I had been doing. No non-human personas, socio-ecological systems, no nothing. I could not care less. I did not want to do anything. I could come up with 1,000 ideas of what could be done, but I didn't want to do any of them. What's the point of doing something meaningless? I thought. And so it was out. The thing, the direction, the purpose that was so important to me for years, one I had put years of dedicated and inspired research into, the only thing I truly believed in was gone. What was left was a massive hole, disillusionment, regret to have ever worked on it, and pure, unequivocal lack of motivation to do anything. I should not have studied this. I should have not done a PhD on designing with nature, a topic that no one seems to care about. I would not have had to endure smirks, demeaning comments, sarcastic jokes, years of trying to prove to others that multi-species had meaning, had value, was not crazy. I could have been like everyone else. Instead, here I am, defeated, demoralized, and over it. So, I did the only thing that seemed right. I let go. If that part of my life was done, then the best I could do was to grieve it, shelve it, and find out what is meaningful to me now. I read, I took courses, I talked to myself and others. I also mapped my values to see what do I actually care about. And side note, if you want to try it, you can try listing your values in 8 categories. That's what I did in my exploration. So the categories are my health, wealth, social life, love, travel, learning, spirituality, and community, and just see what pops up. And it can be pretty eye-opening. It was for me. I was sitting with this nothingness for days, for months, without forcing a resolution, just allowing myself to be lost, void of meaning, void of direction. And the thing that kept popping up was a realization that it's not that I do not value multi-species approaches, but I had spent years around others that didn't understand how I see the world, what I value, and how the status quo solutions, goals, and societal progress makes little sense to me. And by the way, I'm not alone in this. I've discussed with some multi-species researchers that once you start seeing the world in a multi-species way, most of the current status quo stops making sense. But of course, it doesn't make it easier to deal with, but it seems to be an existing experience, not just a personal one. I had spent years convincing, teaching, selling, over-explaining to people who did not find meaning or value in my work and perspectives. They valued other things. No matter how much I would explain, I would have never gotten through to them. As they say, you can take a horse to the water, but you can't make it drink. Once I started unpacking experience with these others, oh my God, them haters, as the entitled Instagram and TikTok influencers would say, I started to rebuild my meaning, mine, not someone else's. And I was able to let go of parts of multi-species work that had indeed become meaningless, and more on that in the next essay. Then, one day, my motivation came back. Maybe because I allowed myself to show up as I am, not in a way that should convince others to care about what I do. I allowed myself to be me and decided to let others be themselves, even if that means that they will not value me, my work, or multi-species approaches. So, aside from a personal story, what does all this have to do with multi-species work? In the past years, much of multi-species work and also nature positive, regenerative, and there is a multi-species digest post where you can learn about the different meanings of these terms that I will also link in the show notes and is linked in the essay. But a lot of the discussions that I have observed have been about proving to others that these approaches are meaningful, valid, and valuable, and by proxy to motivate others to join in. And to add, I think a lot of these discussions are also framed in terms of we're going to solve sustainability, doing this with the, in my opinion, agenda to really proving to others why multi-species or seeing human nature entanglements or valuing nature beyond its instrumental value is important. On one hand, it's understandable direction for an approach that tries to establish itself, especially if those working on it want to solve sustainability. On the other hand, it puts people in multi-species work. So the work that values nature, understands human nature interconnection and interdependence, and or values nature beyond its instrumental contributions. So this approach puts multi-species work in a seemingly inferior or try-hard position, always trying to prove to others, trying to convince, worrying that others won't understand, and as if asking permission to be and justifying why more than human approaches even exist. The thing is, I strongly believe that those who have arrived to being curious about and doing multi-species work experience a shift in values and in meaning of life. For them and for us, for me. Money may not be the main motivation. Neither is hitting the biggest sales, building the next technology or gadget, designing the coolest new product. It's not important to gain political power and neither producing the best new film or whatever it might be that is important in this older system. So a lot of old systems, structures, cultural norms, business goals, urban plans, social status symbols stop making sense. But the rest of the people, the rest of the world have kept their old ones or have developed their own new meanings of life that has nothing to do with multi-species. And hint, I think a lot of AI work is maybe moving us in a direction away from multi-species, but maybe that's just my interpretation. So multi-species enthusiasts, in my opinion, have 5 ways to react. The first one would be to freeze and do nothing, remaining in a state of indecision and paralysis. Second one would be to flight, reject their newfound multi-species values and try to fit back into the generally accepted reality. Third one is fight, trying to force their views on others, relying on, for example, manipulation, control, guilt tripping, name calling, and that might be face to face or also behind people's backs. The fourth approach would be fawn, trying to change others' attitudes and views by appeasing and flattering them and avoiding conflict with the hope to get approval, support, or avoid real or imaginary punishment. And fifth is coexist, accepting the views of everyone involved and doing own thing while allowing others to do theirs. And I think I've seen all these 5 play out. I have been in all of these 5 approaches, and of course I might be generalizing a little bit, or there could be a lot more nuance, or even questioning whether there are people that whose values or meanings of life shouldn't be accepted and who need to be prevented for doing what they want to do. But I think that's a much more there needs to be a more nuanced conversation as well. But as a general premise, I think there's many ways that we can react, and it's a bit tricky when we try to force things or fight or fawn people. So I can see that I had spent years in the fight and fawn response, feeling like it was my duty to convince as many people as possible that multi-species is valid, building scientific arguments, teaching, explaining, trying so hard to change others' minds. I was trying to make them accept what was meaningful to me. I was exhausted and never satisfied. And I can imagine that for others, I likely was annoying to deal with. And maybe, just maybe, it made my attempts to promote multi-species less appealing. Forcing or manipulating others, however sweetly and rationally, to accept multi-species approaches is not the way to go. Imagine if right now someone came to you and commanded that from this moment onwards you must be a Christian, or atheist, or vegan, or a fan of a cricket team that you know nothing about. How would you feel about that? Would you want to do it? Would you be motivated to do your best? Or would you want to sabotage it somehow? I think it's important for us multi-species practitioners to value our own meaning while allowing others to have theirs. This means 3 things. First, accepting, openly sharing, defending our multi-species views when needed, showing ourselves without trying to make sure that we inspire or convince others. So in essence, just being and doing what we want to do and what we believe in. Second, accepting that others can and do value, care about, and find deep meaning in other things. And third, not seeking permission to frame project in a multi-species ways. Not seeking a preemptive consensus from everyone involved that multi-species is relevant here. Just doing and letting others experience. Like, do you think an AI bro would seek a consensus from everyone involved to be allowed to suggest or advocate for AI in a project? We are allowed to have our multi-species meanings and motivations, and we can also allow others to arrive to multi-species ways in their own way, through their own journey, even if they never do. So they actually are motivated to do genuine multi-species work without resentment or sabotage. And in that way, I also believe that there are important practical ways how we can integrate work around meaning in multi-species. So in practical terms, what can you do to work with meaning while growing as a thinker, practitioner, and trying to deliver projects? And there's 3 categories. So one is working with self, working with others, and the last one is working on projects. So let's start with working with self. Be radically honest with yourself. What is meaningful to you? Why multi-species is valuable to you? Sustainability, protecting nature, valuing the inherent value of all beings, or is it because it's trendy? Because a lecturer said so? What do you truly believe in? You can't work with and benefit from things that you deny. Be clear, or second point is, be clear about your values and motivations. Do you value money, frugality, wild nature, gardens that boost biodiversity in a tamed way? Do you value working with communities or boards of directors? Do you want recognition? Do you want to save the world, or do you want to be a good person? Or maybe to prove to self and others that you are one? Do you want to be a good ancestor? What is a good person? What is a good ancestor? Or are you super anxious about sustainability and are frantically trying to do anything to make the problem and your anxiety go away? The third, differentiate between what is genuinely yours and what you have picked up from others, be that values, perceptions, ideas of what is good or bad. One way to do that is just asking yourself, is this mine or is it someone else's? And fourth one, grow your capacity for discomfort, for being misunderstood or feeling different. Discomfort is the place where you can grow, and others don't owe you extra work to alleviate you from your discomfort. Then, moving into the next category, working with others. Here's 3 points here. First one, spend time finding out what is meaningful to people you are working with. Is it community, money, fun? Having meaningful encounters, enjoying functional and green urban spaces, learning about others can allow you to find connections, often unexpected ones, between your multi-species ways and what is valuable to others. Maybe, just maybe, your values are not as different as you can think. and the solution can include both. Second, work on accepting that some people will never value nature and will not understand or find meaning in multi-species approaches, like you would not or maybe never will find meaning in Scientology worldviews. And I think here to add, it's important to pick the battles that you want to fight. If you sense that the person is very entrenched and truly doesn't understand value of nature, ask yourself whether that is someone that you want to invest your time, energy, and effort in trying to change their minds, maybe rather than working with people who are already curious or exhibit the signs that they might be open to changing their mind. And the third point here is don't force, manipulate, try to convince others. If you want motivation, don't force your meaning onto them. You will breed resentment where most likely you want to create motivation. Then, moving on to working on projects. First, spend time finding out what is meaningful to people and organizations in the project. Of course, there is money and keeping my job or doing, but what else is there? People show up to these projects both as organizations, but also things might be under the surface that you might tap into. So spend time finding out what their meaning is. Second, try to find win-win solutions that allow the client and other stakeholders to meet their goals and satisfy what is meaningful for them, while also satisfying the needs of nature. And I really want to underline this point here because I think sometimes I have even caught myself throughout the years thinking, well, no, I don't want to make a solution, or I don't even want to think about solutions that will satisfy human needs because or make money for this company because that infringes on the needs and rights of nature. So the humans shouldn't benefit in this project or situation or solution that I'm creating. And I think that's a really good way to breed resentment and also to lose people. So I think for right now, so much multi-species work needs to also be done in a way that is win-win. Human needs need to be met, and also nature's needs need to be met. For now, I don't think that it's debatable that we can just leave every human behind. How that is done is a good question, though, and I think a lot of you are very creative, and you can spend time figuring that out. So the third approach while working in projects is to use multi-species approaches even if the project is not explicitly framed like that. Be brave and show up without social ecological systems map or non-human persona. You are allowed to bring this cutting-edge approach and way of thinking to your work without explicit permission from everyone involved. And fourth one, challenge people when needed, but do not force them. They might come around to multi-species approaches on the second, the third, or the fourth go, but if you force them, they might disappear after the first one, while also resenting you and everything to do with multi-species. You want to build their genuine motivation, even if that takes time. And I want to add here a thought that recently came up in a conversation with someone, that there might also be cases where multi-species is not relevant. For example, if you're developing a mobile application and your multi-species impact is not necessarily in the phone or the app that you're building, but it's somewhere down the line in the data center in the middle of nowhere in Finland, I think it's important to also check and think, okay, is the project that I'm working on, how much relevant for multi-species work is here? So then also you don't waste your time trying to convince your client that, well, if we use less energy, then we don't need that many data centers and yada, yada, yada. So try to evaluate whether there is visible, direct, or very closely tied nature impact or nature dependence and going from there. But maybe there are cases when you don't necessarily need to do multi-species work. So, on to the closing remarks. The longer I worked on this essay, the more I thought that I need to add disclaimers at the end, as some of you might find parts of my journey unrealistic. So here are 2 things that have been vital in arriving here. First, I'm privileged to having the social and financial support of a Nordic welfare state during time of transition. Doesn't mean that I do not have my duties towards it and have not done other things during these months. Not everyone has this kind of cushion and support, so maybe for you, you might need to figure out some other ways or deliberately make time and space for managing these, for example, inner work with yourself on meaning, while you allow the rest of life to go on. And second disclaimer is that I have been privileged to spend years with professionals building my capacity for discomfort and deep work around meaning and experiences, while also allowing and learning how to have the everyday life go on. It is a skill that needs to be built. So if you have never done any kind of introspective, reflective inner work, that might be a little bit intimidating at first, but it doesn't mean that you're not able to do it. But now that the disclaimers are over, I do strongly believe that work around meaning and personal experience of meaning is very important in multi-species work for our own sake as practitioners, for the sake of maintaining the social canvas as we navigate change, and for the sake of building motivation. We need to expose others to multi-species ways of thinking and being, and many people are hungry for it, excited, they want to do better. But it needs to come in a way that isn't forceful or manipulative and allows others to be where they are and start from there. Also for ourselves, sometimes it's good to question everything about our own motivations and meaning. Again, I want to reiterate that it requires capacity, as you might enter spaces that your psyche is not comfortable with, and exploring maybe with a therapist, or at least building skills for therapy might be needed, because you are uncovering and might uncover all the trauma and pain, and it's really nice to know how to navigate that. If any of this resonated, like this episode, comment below and consider subscribing. I'm very much open to comments about this new format. If you think of someone who might benefit from reading this essay or listening to this podcast, share it with them. And I hope to catch you in the next one.